Hi, I'm Linda Deir, and last Saturday I read to you from chapter 4 of my true life story, Guided. Her spirit guide angels were her best friends and life coaches. I read about the moment of truth when school exposed me as an oddball. What it felt like to know what it feels like to know yourself when no one else does. How being labeled an oddball at just 5 years old in kindergarten would prepare me for the rest of my life. I was living in two worlds without anyone noticing. While my secret world was uplifting, a place where I was always learning amazing new things, in this world, I was constantly critiquing what to say and strategic about how I acted. I was living a secret life that my spirit guides played a dominant role in. Today, in chapter 5, I will be reading about the consequences of my choices. Although my secret life with my spirit guides and angels remained intact, my character was revealed, and my mother used that against me. My spirit guides were my only lifeline now. The love and trust I had with all of them was so enormous, steady, and true that I could ask them anything and get the answers whenever I needed them. But I was becoming numb to this world. So sit back and relax as I tell the story about how, despite the family function, my spirit guides took me on one journey after another that led me to a greater understanding of myself. Okay, chapter 5, the consequences of my choices. By the end of the first grade, I had adjusted pretty well to school. I had found friends who saw things a lot like me. I had become used to getting kicked out of school, sometimes weekly, when I got into the fights and beat up yet another bully. Most of the teachers didn't like me, and I didn't like them. For my money, they didn't deserve to be liked or respected when they treated the kids the way they did. I thought the kids I hung out with were funny. They made me laugh all the time, despite continually threatening to beat me up. I felt confident that I could handle them, and I proved it. For example, one day I was told I was going to get beat up after school. So I ran home and got my German Shepherd, Teddy. When my would-be attackers showed up, I pretended to be struggling, holding back my snarling monster of a dog, and said I was ready to fight now. They climbed up the trees, jumped on the top of cars, hopped over fences, and some of them just ran down the street. While my response may sound extreme, the fact is, these threats were not empty. Some of these kids had actually beat me up more than once. It wasn't fun for me, but it made me a better and smarter fighter. They were consistently testing me because I was white. I always knew that, but I liked them anyway. I understood that there would always be an edge on our relationship because of the racial tensions and persisted all around us. After all, it was the 1950s and things were not at all like they are today. However, that didn't stop us from liking and respecting each other, even if we fought time to time. There were no pretenses. Our relationships were truthful. That is also what I was used to from my guides. Tip. To many, the truth appears to be coarse. That's why the phrase politically correct became so popular. That's how the coddling of society began. It's no longer okay to speak the truth. Your guides don't follow any of this. They don't have to. The whole point to having input from your guides is to get the truth. So if you are offended by the truth, there will be times when you won't like what your guides have to tell you, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to hear it. At school, the white kids would play boy chase girl games. That's where the boys would chase the girls and try to kiss them. The girls would run into the bathroom so the boys couldn't catch them, but they really wanted them to. In my opinion, this was really stupid. I told those boys who tried to chase me to not do it to me. I would not run away from them. One boy would not stop going after me. I would slug him, but he would persist. So one day, when my mom pinned a flower on my dress with a long florist pin, and that boy came after me on the playground, I pulled the pin out of my shirt and stuck him in the butt with it. He freaked out. I got kicked out of school again, and he moved to a different school. The good news is that the boys never tried that with me again. These boys would pull on my ponytail and I would slug them, but that was different than trying to get me to play their submissive kiss and run games. At one point, though, I did start wondering what it felt like to be submissive like the other girls. They were all the same way, and I was the only different one. I also noticed that these girls would not raise their hand in class when the teachers asked who had the answer to a problem. They didn't want to appear to be too smart in front of the boys. I didn't understand all that because I wouldn't play the phony game and was another reason I was not accepted by the girls or the boys in my class. Even the teachers thought I was obnoxious. It was a social stigma to be your real self if you were a girl. However, one day at school, I decided to experiment. I decided not to participate in the class when the teacher asked us for answers. I wanted to see first what it would feel like to act like these submissive girls. And second, how would they respond differently to me? The outcome was ridiculous. I felt like I was in a void where I couldn't breathe. I was totally stifled. I could also feel resentment. I don't know what the other kids thought of my behaving like the pack. I didn't give the experiment enough time to work. That day, I learned that being non-authentic was not for me. From my perspective, all the girls I knew had sold out. The boys thought they were in charge because the girls were so coy. I could see that the setup had already begun. The boys were given the job of taking care of the girls, and the girls pretended to not be as smart or capable as the boys. That surely did not work for me. I was not concerned with whether the boys or the girls liked me. They didn't like me because they thought I was stupid and that I didn't get it. The teachers saw it the same way. They just created more alienation between me and all of them. Once I understood what was really lying beneath the surface of the boy-girl dynamic, I was clear about what was right for me, and I never questioned it again. I started to see even more reasons why my African American friends were my friends of choice. They were more real with me, and with everyone else for that matter. They didn't play these games with each other. They were a lot like me, but for some reason, they didn't hang out with me at school or after school. We just walked to and from school together. Tip: your guides like it when you experiment. It seems to open a doorway to them to chime in when you need them. You need to listen and learn from them because there's much more going on than what you are focused on. They have great input. When I was in the second grade, my younger brother started kindergarten. He was a lot smaller than the other boys. I had already taught him to fight, but he was still not a strong and confident fighter. He was mostly sweet and didn't have the heart for fighting. In our neighborhood and at school, there was no way you could survive without learning to defend yourself. I looked out for Larry while letting him find his own way, although I would step in when he couldn't defend himself. The kids knew that he had an older sister who protected him, so they were not as aggressive with him as they otherwise would have been. But there was one girl in my grade who started to pick on him. She gave him black eyes, bruises, and scrapes all the time. It went on for months. It got so Larry was afraid to go to school. I'm pretty sure it was her way of calling me out for a fight. I told this girl to leave him alone or she would be dealing with me. She didn't listen and got more aggressive and mean. One day she really hurt Larry. So the next day I told Larry to meet me after school, and we hid behind a bush waiting for her to walk by. When she showed up, I stopped her and asked her why she kept beating up my little brother. She was snotty and said she just felt like doing it. She added that I couldn't stop her. She was a big white girl, bigger than me and a lot bigger than Larry. I provoked her so she would hit me first, so I would be mad enough to beat her up. She hit me, and I beat her up. When it was over, I told her that if she ever hurt my little brother again, I would come after her again. This time she understood. I made her apologize to Larry, and he felt a lot better knowing she would not be hurting him anymore. He also kind of liked that she got a taste of her own medicine. Later that night, the doorbell rang at the house. My dad answered it, and there was that bully girl and her father. She looked terrible. Her father told my dad that I had done this to his little girl. My dad called me to the door and asked me if I had done it. I told him that I did because she would not stop beating up Larry. I had to stop her. Dad looked back at the father and said he hoped she learned her lesson because she had it coming. Dad closed the door and patted me on the back, saying that I did the right thing looking out for my little brother. And that was the end of that. Larry wasn't the only kid to get picked on. There was a fat girl that the kids all made fun of all the time. I knew that wasn't right, so I made her my friend. When I did that, the bullies knew I would stick up for her if they continued to pick on her. Of course, it was just a matter of time before one of them would start up with her, and I was in another series of fights. This time, though, my African American friends stepped in to help me fight these bullies. On the way home from school, we cornered all of them and beat them up. These bullies were many and hard to stop, so I was relieved that my only earthly friends stepped in to help me. These friends knew what I was about, and they liked me for it. They were there whenever I needed their support. I was there when they needed mine. Learning. Bullies are a big problem. Even to this day, they are everywhere. If you or someone you know is being assaulted or threatened by a bully, take it seriously, because letting bullies get away with it only strengthens them. Bullies are also cowards, so they are sneaky. Being exposed and outsmarted are two of their biggest fears, so consult with your guides and figure out how to do that effectively, because they can be stopped. My dad took me aside and talked to me about my energy. He said that I needed to learn to harness that energy or it would become my downfall. Dad understood it, because he also had this pent up energy. I didn't see my energy as extraordinary or anything unusual. It was all normal to me. But Dad knew the burden it was to him when it controlled his better judgment from time to time. And he was concerned about how I would deal with this in my life. Once Larry started school, I began to take him with me everywhere I went: the archery range, the zoo, the amusement park, bowling, swimming at the YMCA, basketball, skateboarding, roller skating, and to the movies. He learned a lot and he learned fast, and we had a lot of fun, and he felt protected. I always had enough money to pay our way from the money I made as a fly hunter. My dad would pay me a penny a fly, and I quickly became Linda the fly hunter. I would kill more flies in a day than my dad wanted to count, sometimes earning as much as $10 in one day. At home, we used to gear up our mini bikes so they would go really, really fast. We would ride them on our street, and the kids would try to catch us, but they never could. That was so much fun, and Larry loved it too. Home life when Dad wasn't around was sketchy, even though we were older and not stuck in the house as we had been when we were younger. We never knew when Mom was going to find fault with one of us and beat us. Larry was taking on more of her wrath now that he was older. It was just better not to be around, so he and I were gone whenever we could be. Mom was never affectionate with either one of us. She liked being left alone so she could read her books on the Old West. She was fascinated with anything related to that era, and her dream was to explore Arizona. We never had friends over to the house. It was simply not an option because of Mom. We knew our family was weird, but we didn't dwell on it. On the other hand, we also had amazing adventures. We were awesome athletes, and we had the coolest things as kids, all because of our dad. Larry was beginning to get the hang of navigating through this family stuff, and he was learning how to steer clear of Mom. As a result, he stopped feeling so scared all the time. Without telling him anything about how I learned any of this, I was teaching him what I learned from my guides. Tip: helping Larry was the project that eased my own suffering. It helped me overcome the threat that was so monumental at the time. When you reach out to help someone else, you do things for them that you never thought of doing for yourself. In a way, you become their guide. Our mother would gossip and talk badly about people all the time. Dad would tell her that if she couldn't say anything nice, to say nothing at all. She would never listen to him. She was stubborn. She let him know not to tell her what to do, and that she'd do whatever she damn well pleased. It became apparent that Dad could not stop her negative behavior. That continued throughout their lives together. My mother would have been happier without any of us, except for Randy. That was a strange and unexplainable relationship. All of this just made Larry and me closer than ever as we worked out ways to maneuver around Mom's constant rage. There came a time when I started thinking about the day I would be able to go out on my own and have this part of my life behind me. I was still wetting the bed, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop doing that. I tried everything. I set the alarm clock every hour to go to the bathroom, and it still happened. My mother used the bed wetting as yet another reason to resent me. She punished me all the time for doing this, but I still couldn't stop. The merry-go-round dream continued exactly the same way it started. So, between that dream and wetting the bed, I really dreaded going to sleep at night, although I had no trouble falling asleep. Randy and Mom were constantly calling me names and tormenting me because of my bedwetting. As a ritual, my mother would make me stand on the kitchen table and instruct each family member to take turns at saying hateful things to me. This was designed to make me feel like I had no value and to convince me that no one in the family wanted me around. In response, I moved into a somber demeanor to deflect their assaults. My mother made them all tell me I was stupid and ugly. My mother started calling me her ugly duckling. That exercise in demeaning me became an undeclared battle of wills between my mother and me. Around the time my mother instituted that mental abuse, I started sleepwalking. Once again, I did it all the time. It was first discovered when my parents saw me walk through the living room and right out the front door one night. When they told me to get back in the house and I just kept walking, they realized I was sleepwalking. I would wake up in the morning and find my things missing. I would look around the house and sometimes find them. When I couldn't find them, they would appear in the most unlikely places. Even in my sleep, I was trying to escape that family environment. Learning. Under such abusive conditions, going into fight or flight mode is a natural response. It becomes survival. Being guided when suffering like this will bring you very close to your guides. So while you are being depleted in one area of your life, you are being blessed in another. You are never alone as you walk through this life. Never. Our parents were very stereotypical in what they taught us as kids. My dad was a building contractor who did concrete foundation work for other home builders. He would take Randy and Larry out on his job sites to teach them the trade. Not me. Being a girl, I was taught how to cook, clean, and sew. I didn't think about any of this. It was just the way things were back then. I actually liked learning what I was taught. I mostly liked sewing my clothes, testing different fabrics, customizing the patterns. I liked experimenting and coming up with my own designs. One day, I asked my dad for materials to build a car out of wood. Although he was a little surprised, he gave me what I asked for. Each day after school, I would work on that car. Dad really liked it and helped me after he got off home from work. Once it was done, Larry and I would pull it around with our mini bikes. It looked like the Flintstones car, and he and I had a lot of fun towing it around. We would give our friends rides in it, and they loved it. It's interesting that although they could see I was different, my parents didn't take me seriously. Their stereotypical thinking was either stronger or easier than what was obvious. From time to time, I would ask my mom and dad when their wedding anniversary was. They would never answer me. My mom would look at my dad and he would walk away. Mom would say, "Oh, it was sometime in June." But that was as specific as she got. I wanted to know it so I could do something special for them. I finally stopped asking because I knew something was fishy. I wouldn't learn the truth for many years. In addition to this adventurous nature, my dad loved playing musical instruments. Dad and I played music all the time on the weekends, just the two of us. I learned to play the organ and the bongos really well. My dad played the Hawaiian slide guitar, the violin, the harmonica, and the accordion. For me, though, the coolest thing he played were the spoons. Dad played spoons so fast and musically, it was mind-blowing to listen to him play those spoons. My dad and I would also watch Friday night fights together, and on Saturday nights, we would watch vampire movies together. No one else was around. It was just Dad and me. We would eat Melba toast and tomato soup. We really got along, and it was very natural doing things with him. I thought when I grew up, I would marry a man just like my dad. I really believed it would be that easy. People called my dad a leprechaun and me a pixie. We were a lot alike and had a very strong bond. One day, I asked my dad about religion. I asked him if he believed in God. He said that from his perspective, religion was filled with hypocrites. He suggested that I would find my own way. This came from a man who was groomed to be a priest from the time he was a boy. Both Mom and Dad were disgusted with the church, and I sensed that Dad had been abused in some way, but he never talked about it. Later in life, I did marry two men who believed in me and were proud of me, but they both lacked confidence. These two marriages ended in divorce because I couldn't compromise. Come to think of it, my dad also lacked confidence, or he might have been successful in steering my mom away from her abusive ways. Tip: having a good relationship with your dad is critical to the relationships you will have with men in your life. The same fact applies to your relationship with your mother. If they are both great parents, you will likely be a balanced person throughout your life, but the opposite is also true. So no matter which way it goes, work through it by understanding what's really going on. The life coach training you will receive from your guides will prove to be a huge value with that. And that's the end of chapter 5. It seems to go so fast. Okay. Next Saturday. Now, what day is that, Ray?
Well, that would be the 18th? Yeah, 17th. 17th. Let me see here.
Let me see. 7 and 9 is
16th.
not the 17th. What is it, Ray?
16th.
Okay. Next Saturday, May 16th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, I will read to you from chapter 6 of Guided, Reaching a Boiling Point. Just, hold on. Getting off track here. To say that my mother was cruel and hurtful, a hurtful bully, is an understatement. She was nasty to everyone, not just me. She bullied and ordered everyone around like they were her servants. It was embarrassing to be around her in public. Additionally, she was a drama queen who fabricated wild stories to cover up her shameful past. Hearing her talk was sad. I knew she was lying and even believing her own lies. I always knew something was wrong with my mother, but no one in the family could or would dare face her. I was hanging on by a thread. So until then, remember, you have help. You are never alone and always being guided.